Oh, and then 5, the percentage of people that actually perform their jobs to the standards for their role. That's the 5th multiplier. But that's the most visible one. That's the one that we
Right.
always want to go to, because that's the visible outcome, and so we always want to go to that. And so we put a whole lot of weight on it. But the truth is, it's the one that's actually the least weighted within all of these.
I was just stuck back on number 4, right? Because number 4 is really, in my mind, usually when I end up talking to a contractor, the wheels on their bus are are loose and shaky and maybe falling off because of some extreme growth.
Building projects requires technical expertise and resources. Building a construction business is about developing and aligning those capabilities with customers. We exist to help contractors build stronger businesses for the next generation. From startup to sustainability, contractors grow through 6 distinct stages. Each stage of growth requires a different leadership focus, strategies, systems, and structure. Our goal is to broadly share information that helps contractors navigate each stage. Any resources discussed are available on our website at dbmteam.com.
Okay, so here we are. Role transitions, brief introduction, number 4. And what so we've already covered stages of contractor growth, and these have all just been the introduction. We've covered the contractor business model, which just gives us a way of looking at the business as a whole. And we covered the talent value stream, just high level overview. So now we're going to be talking about effective role transitions. This is where company meets career meets future type of thing. Or I mean, company meets life and career and future and all of that. And this is going to be exciting to pull this together. So we're going to start probably, with just going through life, career stages and seasons, then get into the job roles and standards, which we touched on a little bit in the last one, and contractors, because ultimately we have to merge these together. We touched on organizational development, what that definition was. We're going to expand on that definition a little bit, the little OrgDev and the big OrgDev. And I think, so you described this perfectly. Ultimately, that organizational development is about ensuring really effective role transitions throughout the organization, up through succession at the ownership and CEO level.
Right.
And then we're going to fall back, talk a little bit about career and life and different progression paths. I know for me personally, the way I thought things were going to go when I was 16 and the way they have gone, not quite exactly the same. However, I love every aspect of it, and that's, I think, what's important, and that's where we're going to start. Then we're going to talk about, okay, great, you're in a new role. How do you get somebody up to speed? How do you get yourself up to speed? How do you help get somebody else up to speed? And I think you identified 2 major ways of doing this: full immersion training versus critical path training. So we'll cover a brief intro to that. We'll go deeper into that in the future. And then selecting somebody for the role, intentional versus biased selection. We're all biased in some way, regardless of how we want to think about ourselves. We all have our biases, and it's really important to be very intentional, even if it's for the same role. Even, for instance, if I was a project manager, but now I'm recruiting for a project manager for the company that's at a different stage of growth, that person that is an ideal fit for that role, and even the role description itself is materially different than when I did the role. So
Right.
it's really important to look at that. And then we're going to kind of wrap up with the top 11 role transition challenges that you and I'd gone through before, and built a little series on that. And we're gonna touch on that. There's more depth on that later. Resources at the end of this, top 11 challenges: a self-evaluation and a role inventory self-evaluation, just to really help you get prepped for how you move through a new role. And coming up next, future stuff, is identifying and prioritizing improvements, and then developing the talent to go get there, which is kind of saying, let's take a look at all 4 of these things together that we've already covered. Where's our biggest priority that we have to work on now? We're never going to be able to approach them all at once. And then we'll cover defining job roles more clearly, which is something that's always progressively done. You never define a job role and call it good. You define a job role for this particular stage of growth where you're at, and knowing that you will look at it in the future and both the job role will change and your ability to clarify it will be dramatically different. And then we'll at levels of strategy, which is, up through that point, this has all been mainly internally looking. Levels of strategy is externally looking at the market and starting to match things up. So that's what we're going to do. That's the resources, and that's what's next. You ready to get into this?
I am ready.
All right. So here's the first thing, and we'll start, and we're going to go left to right, or no, right to left on this. So I want to, these are two concepts. When we met, you started talking about retirement masterpiece.
Right.
I kind of had this philosophy on perfect life, and they're both cool enough terms, I guess. So I want to start with you on the retirement masterpiece, and just how do you see that? What's the difference between a retirement plan and a retirement masterpiece? All of that good stuff.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because most people, right, even when we talk, right, they talk to the other consultants in our group. It's interesting because most people go immediately to the financial plan. Makes sense, right? You got to have the money to live out the life you want. But the problem is most people look at the money, but they have not looked at the life they want to live. They haven't looked at and everybody goes to travel, but they haven't looked at the projects they want to do, the travel they want to do, the places they want to go, the people they want to see, how they really want to spend their time. We find a lot when we get the calls from contractors that, hey, I want to retire in 3 years and I need some help with succession planning. It's like, oh, there is so much more to it than just succession planning, right? It's backing up into, kind of mid-career and taking a look at where do you want to be, where do you want to go, and starting to run toward where you want to be. Because if we really, if you put life in big chunks, right? The big chunks are the first 20 years, give or take a few years, is all about kind of educating you on life, right? Whether that includes college or doesn't. It's the first kind of 20% of your life, assuming people are living to 100. The next 40 years or 40% of your life is working, and hopefully working at something you love. And then the next 40 years or 40% of your life is doing all the stuff that you wanted to do when you were done working. And so that middle 40 years really needs to pave the way for that. It needs to pay for that. It needs to emotionally set the stage for that, psychologically set the stage for that, and help you get to do the things that you really, really, have thought about, the things you really want to do. Some people want to go see every ballpark in the nation. Others want to spend more time with their family. Others want to see, all the 7 wonders of the world. But it's a plan, right? It's a plan, and more than just financial is really where it ends up. So, but you've got the perfect life, which is, kind of the same thing, but I guess mine's more a little more behavioral. I like your graph.
Yours is behavior. Well, interesting. So mine's, I guess I'll go back to what shaped it. And the first time I think I put it in writing, just, how I think about things was probably about 2004. It's just before the kind of official quote unquote start of the business, the consulting business. But this is really, when it goes back to, I guess when I was a teenager, I was watching a lot of different people around me. I've just been an observant person. And I watched a lot of people, go through and do things that they had to do. We all have to do things that we must do to make, raise kids, pay the bills, whatever that takes. But I saw a lot of people going what I considered, even at 13, 14 years old, going too far down that road. And they were working towards retirement, but a retirement plan, the financial aspects of a retirement plan, which is great, and it's fine and dandy. There's a million, and that has to be done. That's a prerequisite, but they weren't necessarily enjoying their life as they went along. And then I started to get, and that's one thing. That's a dreamy teenager or something like that. But then I start to get a little bit older, and I'm working my way up in my career, and you see some of those people passing away. I mean, life can take you out for any number of reasons, sometimes earlier than we want. We don't, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So you're not, so to me, it's not living as if I'm going to die tomorrow, but it is looking at it. And I break things into two categories. There's the things that I have to go do. I may be excellent at it, but I don't necessarily love doing it, but I actually have to go do it. Like claims or litigation. I'm actually pretty good at it. I really just don't enjoy it that much. But sometimes, just in your building projects, you have to go do that. That's just part of the job. And so, but then there's things that I absolutely love doing that also add value. And, and that value may be, in a financial value, measured in that way. It may be emotional value like you talked about. But getting really intentional about understanding what those are, knowing that they shift over time, and then every day really kind of looking back at it every day, week, month, year, having a reflection process of looking back and saying, how do I spend a little bit more time doing the things that we love doing and less times doing the things that we must do? And that comes down to a bunch of little choices. Rarely are they what I consider like light switch type choices. Like, well, before I was doing my job and there was 90% of the things that I had to do and 10% of the things I love do. And I flipped a light switch and I made one decision and all of a sudden it's like I flipped that ratio. Theoretically it could be possible. I've never seen it in my own life. I've never seen it in anybody else's life. It's 100 small decisions that you make every single, day, month, year. And progressively over time, it's been pretty amazing to watch how that adds up. So that's mine. And then when I met you and you started talking about retirement masterpiece, I'm like, oh, it's like peanut butter and chocolate. They go together. So, anyways, a lot of the same philosophies. And Roger Whitney, that book Rock Retirement, I think where he's the one that coined that term, retirement masterpiece. Yeah, there's a lot of that in there. Even though he's a financial planner, and financial planning takes an aspect of it, he's really talking about designing the life that you want and thinking about how you stay vibrant and everything. So anyways, I just kind of, I look at it like this. And when we're coaching people, I mean, whether it's the owner of the business or whatever stage they happen to be at. I was working with somebody earlier this week, and he's in his 40s, started up the business and is doing fantastic, but it's still looking at him and going, what do you really love doing? What aspects of the business do you really love doing? Because that's going to shape, a bit of how we design the organizational structure and the organizational development, the strategies and everything like that. And, there's some things that, he might've said, and he didn't, but he might've said, no, I really love doing this. And it's like, probably not going to work out. Right. but luckily the things that he really loved doing, we can go shape the organizational design and the organizational development, the strategies and everything around that. And so he will be able to spend more time progressively, over the next 5-10 years doing the things that he loves doing and less time doing the things that just have to be done. And yet finding people, just because like I hate doing something, there's somebody else that absolutely loves doing the same thing that I hate doing.
That's right.
And
That's
the
exactly
beauty.
right.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of organizational development and trying to get people right roles, right fit. So anyways, we're starting here, right? This sets the foundation for everything we're going to talk about next. So, stages and seasons, life and career. And so this is building on what we just talked about, right? And you identified it perfect of childhood, young adult, maybe that first 20, 25 years. Maybe you get into parenting, and not everybody gets into parenting. Some people get into it earlier. Some people, I got into it later. But, maybe you're there, maybe you're not. And then you go into an empty nester phase and your retirement masterpiece, right? That's your, a simple model. And some seasons in that model might be taking a sabbatical to focus on parenting, taking care of a sick or aging family member. These are all things that take a period of time, and it's going to feel like things are on pause or maybe even things are backsliding, but that's normal when you look at it over the context of 60, 80 years, 100 years. You throw out the 100 years, that's awesome. Yeah, might go through a divorce. You might cope with a health issue. And careers are, you described this well, right? You had those entry-level roles. You had this stuff in the middle that's your career. And then you have this retirement offboarding piece, which we touched on a lot before. there's also seasons in that. You might be on a challenging project that kind of takes you out of commission and takes a couple of years off your life for a few years. You were on one of those, right?
Yeah,
That was
yeah. There was one of those, the I-405 project, where you get the call that they need the help, and they say it's going to be for 6 months, and it's the minute you say yes, the 6 months really
right.
means a year, and the year probably means two, right? So yeah, it's a couple years of your life you don't get back. You learn a lot, you help a lot of other people, but yeah, sometimes you wonder if it's going to shorten shorten that lifespan.
Yeah, I think I got to the point where I almost just think almost every problem you probably deal with at different levels of management, which just gets into time span and some other things we can talk about. But yeah, at that level, every problem is pretty much a 2-year problem. It's going to be 6 months of lots of pain, and then progressively less pain over the next 18 months.
Right.
But it becomes all encompassing. You have to dive in, and that may be a challenging project. It may be a business turnaround, an economic downturn, like getting, say navigating mid 2008 to mid 2010. That was a really big deal. Navigating through COVID, that those are things where you just kind of work through it. And those are these different seasons, and you could also be recovering from a career setback. You're, as much as we want to think that everything comes down to skill and choice and all of those things, there's a lot of things that are just flat out roll of the dice.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to have, you can be working up through a career track and a progression, and you can have a bad project. You can have a bad turnout for your business unit if that's where you're managing or something. And yeah, you're going to be probably passed over for the next promotion, and that it happens. You have to work your way back through elimination rounds just in sports. So anyways, that's does this set the stage enough for everything else we're going to talk
Yeah,
about?
I think it does. The one thing I want to add, and this this happened to me in my career a long time ago, right? And it was really the life and career together. My husband and I had been married probably for a couple of years. We were over in Hawaii. I got the promotion to Northern California, and he had literally the week before just got a promotion in his company, and was now working on a sports arena, and they had just started the job. And I looked at him and said, "I can't not take the job." And he goes, "And I can't leave mine." And we decided right then and there we were not going to make short-term decisions or long-term decisions on a short-term problem. We knew we were going to have to,
Right.
fly over the ocean for a couple of years, but said, you know what? A couple of years out of 40, so what, right? But you really do have to think about these things as seasons. They're short. They're something you can work through. You'll come out on the other side, and you got a lot of things on the other side. So be careful about making a long-term decision on a short-term problem, and short-term might be a couple of years.
Yeah. But now you have a great vacation spot that you guys get to. How many times a year do you go to
We
Hawaii now?
try to go 2 or 3 times a year. So, yeah.
Okay. So you guys have, and I want to get into this because you guys have what I think is such an amazing life. You're living that retirement masterpiece. So
Yeah.
every time I see you and Jeff, you guys are laughing, you guys are having fun. You're like kids. It's cool.
Well, we're also like kids where people just want to get us out of their house. So,
Yeah, there's that too. All right. So, I like the way you also framed it. I framed some of the seasons in life and careers. Obviously, I'm pessimistic. Here's the bad things, but you're right. There's a lot of good things that can occur that you can go through there. Those are also different seasons. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of those. So,
yep.
So previously we talked about the kind of the basic foundation that contractors exist to build projects on one side, and it's people that design and build the projects on the other side. And the business of building is really about pulling the people together. That's where the manager comes in. So this is now where we start to pull together, here's what a contractor needs, and and the project needs, and here's what a contractor needs, and here's what I need out of my career and my life. And the better we can pull those things together, the better off things run. And in today's talent market, really, it's talent that has more choices than contractors have choices of who they're going to hire.
Mhm.
So, and so I think it's more important than ever that the managers are really looking at it. And it's not about acquiescing to somebody and thinking that culture is about ping pong tables and beanbag chairs or anything like that. It's not. If you dive deeper even into the companies where you see that, that's like the visible exterior. That is not part of that's not what their culture is or what it's about. It is about building people and building a company as you go through it. So I think we need to go back and give ourselves a little bit of foundation to remind ourselves that there's these different progressive levels of growth and standards as we go along. And ultimately you're bringing somebody into a job to go perform work to within those standards, and that changes over time. So just want to run through this really quick. And we covered this two or three episodes ago.
We've done the deep dive. Yeah, you're right. Just a quick overview.
Yeah, we've done that. But just to kind of back up a quick, I guess, recap. Contractors go through these different stages of growth. Each one's about a tripling of headcount. And when they go through these different stages of growth, they're going to be delivering more projects to customers each year. Those projects are typically going to be larger and more complex, and they require more support, progressively more support systems. And that's kind of that wrapper around of those support systems. That's the business of building. Building the project is building the project. That's the core thing. And then there's the business of contracting, and that's largely what we're talking about here. And like I said, those happen with about 3 times every tripling of headcount. You have to evolve the strategies for project types, for sizes, for velocity. So for instance, contractor at stage 1, with maybe 5 employees or something, they're doing really small projects. They're working out of the back of pickup trucks. They're showing up to a job site. It might be residential. It might be light commercial, small projects. Get up into stage 3 where now you have 50, 75 employees, and you can go build some pretty decent projects. You're building progressively larger projects. Once you get up into stage 6 plus, where 1,500 employees or more, you're really looking at, you have to keep, that's a big machine. And I think this gets into your tornado description. This is the top of the tornado. It's huge. It's hundreds and hundreds of miles across, and yet the winds are still going a couple hundred miles an hour. And you have to keep that workforce busy. You have to keep them productive. So you're now looking at large construction programs, like an entire campus build out, or a hospital that might have 3 new towers coming up over the next 20 years. And you're getting involved at that early stage of programming and design. And that's just a whole different level. So then with that, then there's these standards for performance, and the standards for performance to support those strategies, those have to evolve. And this is where, human meets company type of thing. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit more, as we go forward in terms of how it ties together the job role. But that first level of standard where everything starts is just subjective. It's a judgment. It's a person that has an idea and says thumbs up, thumbs down, and it's subjective judgment. All standards start there. There's nothing wrong with that. And as a company progresses forward, standards will become progressively clearer at a lower level of the organization for roles that have been in place for a long time. For instance, like a job foreman or something. But they will, at the very top levels, as you're adding new roles and everything, those new roles will have less clear standards, and that creates a whole different challenge for somebody moving into those roles. That's why this is important to cover. Second step is we've got some metrics. We now have something to measure. It's no longer thumbs up, thumbs down, right? It's metrics. It's a simple metric is a production rate, X number of cubic yards per hour. Moving up into now, once we have that, then it's like, oh, how do we do this? So we have standards on a procedure. You do step 1, step 2, step 3, always in this sequence. If you get to step 4, and you go right or go left, either go to step 5 or go to step 7. So procedures, how do you do something? And that becomes another level of standard. A lot easier, obviously, if you can put somebody in a role and there's procedures in place for it. Those procedures are and you described this one perfectly, that, in the ideal world, I would love to set a standard of saying, I want to get, I don't know what a reasonable, 100 feet an hour or something, if that's my production rate. I want a procedure to get me there 100% of the time. So that's fairy tale land. Once we get into the real world, we start to realize that getting to 100% tolerance likely costs more money, and there's more bureaucracy, more negative bureaucracy related to that than it is worth it to get to 100%. So now we say our variability range. So we say our average is this. Our high-low range is 90 to 110 feet per hour, or whatever it happens to be. And so we understand what our variability ranges are, and our procedures then are designed to go to most predict that we are going to hit within that range. And then we start to look at it and go, we've got to go tie, for instance, we've got to tie this all together across the organization. And this sounds simple. It sounds simple, but it's definitely not easy to go do. So for instance, that production rate of 100 feet per hour, making sure that ties back to estimating. So from field operations to project management to estimating, that these things all flow together so that we are constantly estimating the jobs for exactly what we can produce it for in the field. And we have this feedback both from a market standpoint and from an actual field production standpoint. And we know how all that works. And then we can look at it and try and continually improve that. But when we don't, and we see that happen all the time, that's a struggle that every company goes through. Everybody wants to have estimating tie perfectly to operations, yet the workflows usually don't exist between those two. So, and then finally you get up to this stage, your final stage of standards, which we'll get to, is where you have actual management systems in place for quality assurance, quality control, making sure that you have it. So maybe you don't have the fox watching the hen house. So I'm not like self-reporting on my production, because I know that if I'm self-reporting on my production, the day that I hit 120 feet per hour average, I'm going to report that one. The day that I hit 85 feet per hour, I'm probably not going to report it quite as clearly. And that's just human nature. It's okay. Or I may explain the rationale, because I may frame the rationale for why I got 85 feet per hour. I may explain that differently. It's important to start to separate those functions out so that somebody that's got some distance from it can go see what's actually happening and troubleshoot it. And I remember reading in Keyways magazine back in, I think it was 1996. I remember finding I don't know where it was. It was in a customer's office, but I picked it up and was reading it. And you had a really good article written where you had a field engineer that was tracking the production and really just observing haul trucks and everything like that. And they'd seen a process work on another job site. So a field engineer, not the superintendent, not the foreman, a field engineer had an idea that was able to, and I love the way you broke it down. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it increased productivity quite a bit just on hauling. So that's the value of having those management systems in place. And that's a system at Kiewit. That's not something a person did. That's a system. So, So anyhow, how did I do describing that progression on standards? And is that
I think the progression was great. I think where I used to, and I know a lot of people do, is we actually get stuck a little bit on two, because it's like, well, I'm measuring this, so I must have a procedure because I'm measuring it. So therefore we must have it, right? They assume there's a procedure until you start to see, you start to notice in number 4, it's like, why is this crew getting 80 feet an hour and this one getting 110 feet an hour, and they're on the same job, same type of conditions, all that. A lot of times then they'll back up into number 3 and go, oh, because they're doing it differently, right? So a lot of times I think you jump around until you realize that you've missed a step. And so you see the ranges, you come back, you do a procedure, right? You literally have your checklist of things to do. And then again, you assume you have a workflow. It's like, well, no, you don't. But it takes a minute when they go back in and go, well, here's what it costs us to do this work on this job. why aren't we estimating the same, for a similar job? It's like, well, how did that information get in here? How do we know? That's when they start to realize those connections don't exist. So I think the explanation's great. I just think people see it differently. They get to 2, think they're at 4,
Yeah.
they come back to 3, and it takes a while to really steadily move, 1 through 6. I think there's a
Right.
lot of up and down, a lot of jumping around until they figure it out.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's a great point because you're right. When you first do the procedure, when you when you look at it on a slide like this, it seems really
Yeah.
simple. In real life, it's not that easy because you're walking forward into it. So when you, like you said, you get to step 2, I don't know there's a step 6, and I can't even really imagine a step 6 for this at this point in time because I'm barely figuring out 2. So I just put 2 in place, and I think that I'm
Mhm.
done, and then I get to 3 and I get to 4, but I've got, oh, maybe my metrics actually need to change. Maybe my procedures need to change. So it is a constant cycle each time. And the process in and of itself to keep up with this is really, really hard.
Yeah.
So anyways, and that progressively also gets better over time as the company grows and matures. But yeah, you're right. That's a cycle. Great, good point. Yep, not a static environment. So,
Exactly, exactly.
all right. So now if we, kind of look at contractor needs, we need to put people together with what the work needs to be done, and we need to have, we need performance. And so a lot of times, and this is a simple way of looking at it, is at kind of the bottom of the pyramid. We have a lot of people that are in a role and they are doing work to a standard, and that's the foundation that the company is built on. And then there's a much, much smaller layer of people that are, say, supervising them. They are refining the systems, they're training those people, they're managing to the standards. That's the quality control and the systems, the quality assurance aspects of it. And that's that role of that frontline manager. And then you move up a layer, and you have the people that are setting the standards and aligning them with strategy, systems, and structure. And that's a really small group of people. Now it's pretty easy to go sit there and have, say, like, oh, well, we didn't get this outcome. If somebody didn't perform to standard, and so or the businesses are performing well, so therefore it must be the people. And but there's really 5 different things that all have to go together to produce a business outcome. And it's, I think, we're not going to dive deep on this, but it's important to go through there and understand that business outcomes are really a product. It's a choice 1 multiplied by choice 2 by choice 3 by choice 4 and 5. And it's one of our team members, Courtney, always says, like, do you have any 0 multipliers on here? And the first one is strategic choices. If you have to choose to be in the right markets. You can be the most effective horseshoe manufacturer on the planet, but circa early 1900s, that was not a winning strategic choice.
Right.
Your business was going to slowly decline no matter how operationally effective you were. The second thing is you have to have these standards for performance have to be integrated into a viable business model and align with the strategy. So what does that really mean? It means that if, let's say, we have that standard of performance of 100 feet per hour, and that's kind of like a one-sided standard, that there's a couple other things that need to go with that. What's the crew cost to get there? So do I get 100 feet per hour with a crew cost that costs $10,000 a day, or 100 feet per hour with a crew that costs $30,000 a day? Because those are 2 very different things. So it's really not just a feet per hour or whatever it is. There's a cost element that goes with that as well. And those things all have to fit together in a business model that's viable. So if the market is only willing to pay $100 a foot for this thing, but my standard, it comes in $125 a foot, it's just not a viable business model. It's quite, that it's that simple. So now you can't lie to it. You can't say, well, the market only pays $100 a foot. I mean, we see this all the time, right? People talk about winning work. Okay, the market only pays $100 a foot for this thing. We can only install it for $125 a foot. So unless you have a really clear strategy and plan that over a relatively short period of time, you're going to be able to bring your production costs down for that particular thing down to $100 a foot or less. The reality is you just don't have a viable business model.
Right.
And yet you see people doing it all the time. They start to sell a project for what the market will bear rather than what they can actually perform it at, and then finding opportunities that fit. So anyways, 1 and 2 are really kind of big parts of this outcome. Then we've got to have a system, like you said, the steps 3, 4, 5, where you have these procedures all the way up through workflows and up through management systems that create these consistent outcomes to the standard. How do we make sure that we're consistently performing this thing for $100 a foot? Then you get into the management structure that supports those systems and strategy. And notice that these were the management structure comes after systems. You don't put the structure in place and then figure out the system. You put the systems in place, and then you figure out the structure that best supports the system. And then that structure has to support a combination of the system, the strategy, and the organizational development. And we'll dive into that a little bit further. But if you're only getting the task done, but you're not developing the people, you will achieve a business outcome, but you will only achieve it in a really short period of time because you won't be developing the people for what tomorrow's growth looks like. And then 5, the percentage of people that actually perform their jobs to the standards for their role. that's the 5th multiplier. But that's the most visible one. That's the one that we always want to go to, because that's the visible outcome, and so we always want to go to that. And so we put a whole lot of weight on it. But the truth is, it's the one that's actually the least weighted within all of these, as far as outcomes go. So, anyways, that was a lot, Sue. I probably did a horrible job of describing that one.
No, I was just stuck back on number 4, right? Because number 4 is really, in my mind, usually when I end up talking to a contractor, the wheels on their bus are loose and shaky and maybe falling off because of some extreme growth. People are very task oriented, and the organization itself has not grown enough. It's grown in people count, but it's not grown enough to support, just like it says, the systems. There's probably not much of a strategy. Their strategy's been, let's take all the work we can take. And
Right.
Now you've hired a bunch of people, and now these people are really untethered because they don't know what the standards are, because the growth has been so much, and it's been hurry, build this one. And that's just where I tend to see the wheels fall off the bus. So number 5, although a lot of times not super visible, is really where you can see we have a standard, we have people performing to it, and we know that, right? That's where the knowledge of all this stuff kind of finally culminates, it seems.
And I think, just like you pointed out on the standards piece, this is not a checklist. You don't do like, okay, we're going to do everything in number 1 perfectly, then we're going to go to number 2. I mean, these are things that happen in a continuous cycle and get continually better, and they change over time. But business outcomes are truly a product of all 5 of these.
Yep.
So as we get in and we're talking about it, people performing to the standard, and we hear that a lot. The breakdown in 4 culminates in somebody usually saying so-and-so is not doing their job. And a lot of times it's because so-and-so didn't even know they were supposed to do that job, or they were overloaded. Nobody's paying attention to the capacity side of it. And the other day I was in, and here's the hard part, and we'll get into biases and stuff in a little bit, but I think I'm a reasonably driven person and everything. So if I see a book like Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink, I'm like, yeah, that's a great book. So I'm like in this guy's office, and he's vice president, and he's got a half dozen copies of the book in his office. Good book, Extreme Ownership. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have extreme ownership, but if you don't have a process in place, and now you have 5 or 6 people that are doing the same role, like say project management, and you've changed the structure a bit, extreme ownership can actually it can make a lot of the problems a lot worse, because everybody's like, all right, I just got to knuckle down and do it. And you see the lights burning until 7 or 8 p.m. And that eventually just burns people out. That makes people open to the recruiter that's calling.
That's right.
Some people just end up leaving. So, you see it, and then they're like, well, so and so wasn't performing, they weren't doing that, and you're like, they were working really hard, they weren't doing what needed to be done, but that's not necessarily their fault.
That's right.
So that's
Because
like you said,
typically
number four.
typically whose fault is it? It's the manager.
The manager. Yep, which, as you said, that's where the breakdown occurs in number
Yeah.
4.
Yep.
So anyways, this starts to create the foundation. We're going to be back and forth between, the person and the contractor and the career and all that, throughout the rest of this. Which this is where you come in, where the talent value stream pulls this together.
Well, I tell you, just in all the conversations that we've had over the last, half a dozen years, it's interesting how the talent value stream just kind of was the organic visual response to all of those conversations, right? Because yes, on the left-hand side here, right, contractors exist to build projects, but it's those people that actually build the projects. But getting them in, helping them to be the person they want to be means that the organization has to take more than just a, hey, let's hire some people kind of approach, right? So in here, we want to make sure that in watching your talent and looking at it as the full value stream from the time you're planning the people you need to hire, the positions you need to hire, who you need to hire, looking at it whether you're a stage 1 contractor, stage 6 contractor, right? What does that planning look like? What is your onboarding, or sorry, what's your recruit to hire going to look like? Where are you going to find these people? What are you going to tell them to come to work for you, right? What is it that is going to get them to come to work for you? What does that onboarding look like? Is it several several people I had to work with that I was out in trailers all the time in the field, and those trailers sometimes were the double wides, and we weren't hooked up to any of the facilities, but one of them had always been a bathroom. And what did they do? We built a desk over the bathroom, and somebody got that office. Is that really a really good onboarding process that they got to sit in the makeshift isn't a bathroom anymore kind of thing? Now, maybe, but there's probably an explanation that needs to go with that, right?
I see some efficiency there.
Well, there was some efficiency there, but it's kind of hard to call home and tell your folks that you got this great job, and yet you're sitting in the what could be, if hooked up, the bathroom. So really, what are the optics when people come? Really, why do they want to come, and how can we make them feel like this is a place for them, right? How can we explain that culture fit? How can we really bring them in? And then once they're there, how do we keep them, right? What do we do for training? What do we do for development? And development is both the depth of professional development, the trajectory of leadership development, succession planning, performance management. How do we keep people, again, in this loop of, and it's all retention, right? They're producing, they're performing, but it's all about retention. How do we keep them? And then when people are ready to go, how do we put together a decent offboarding plan that all that institutional knowledge and expertise and all of that just doesn't go with them? How can we make that more of a slide out the door as opposed to the cliff, right? Here's your gold watch, get out. Because as long as talent is your constraint, where you can't grow because you don't have enough people, somewhere in this talent value stream, and maybe numerous places, is where we're missing the boat. Because when you don't have the talent, you cannot build the work. I know, and David, I'm sure you know it too. I know a lot of people, they're like, okay, we're going to bid these next 3 or 4 or 5 jobs. They pick up 2 of them, and the client asks, okay, so when can you start? And they're looking now, they're looking at their talent and going, who do we have that can build this?
Right.
They probably have the excavators. They probably have, the loaders, but they don't have the people. So this is imperative to make sure that people are there for growth and not the constraint that keeps you from growth.
And as bad as we talk about the supply chain issues now and how the lead times on certain materials, the lead time on highly specialized talent,
Yeah.
technical talent, and highly experienced leadership talent. Ooh, yeah, there's a really a bad supply chain problem going on there. That's not
That's
going to
right.
get better for the next. This is not a matter of freeing up some chip making capacity or something. That won't get better for about the next 15 plus years. So
Right.
that planning is a really big deal. And then
Yes.
trying to match up, which we'll get to with the strategy discussion, but trying to match up your resources with your opportunities really well.
Yep.
So we covered this a lot more in a lot more depth last time. So
Right.
if you missed it, go back, go watch Talent Value Stream piece. So last time we left off with a little bit of a discussion on the company. If you look at in three broad a triangle with three broad pieces, you have the strategy. Where are we going to play? How are we going to win? You have the operational excellence piece. That's really about building the projects and executing the strategies. But it's also about all of the supporting operations that go around that. So to build a project, you need to have accounting. To build the project, you need to have purchasing. To build a project, you need to have human resources. So that it's over there. The organizational development piece is ensuring that talent never really constrains operational excellence, just like you had just described. And then there's this big organizational development aspect of it of ensuring that succession is going to be able to happen and the business will be sustainable into the future. So I wanted to dive further into the definition of this, and then this is where you take it on, because this is your whole. Yeah, this is why you went back to school after 2.5 decades or so in leadership. But so organizational development, I pulled this definition off of the Association for Talent Development. It's a great definition. An effort that focuses on improving the organization's capability through the alignment of strategy, structure, people, reward systems, bonuses, incentives, and such, metrics, which we just covered, and management systems. It's a science-backed interdisciplinary field rooted in multiple fields. So it's like bringing all these things together. So you started out with an accounting degree, right? And then you
Yes.
moved on to the job site, into a trailer. You started operating equipment, all kinds of crazy stuff. Where did you go from there? How did you start to see organizational development, and how's that your life's work?
Yeah, well, many interesting stories there. Yes, I've operated equipment, but not well, and not for much time at all. So just so we're clear, I am a hazard to anyone when I'm doing that. But
But
it's
capable.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. So, was 20 some years into my career and into the Kiewit organization, and uh, in leadership, right, you're looking around. Yes, there's metrics you have to follow. There's all sorts of things, but really your purpose is to train and develop those around you into the expertise that they need and help them to see the larger picture and the strategy of the pieces that they're working with. And in that organization, when you get, kind of high enough, you start to look around and you start to be in some of these meetings and you start to just sit and think and go, this is just so not about building the work anymore, because you start to see the rest of the story that's going on. And I like the very first check mark here on the slide where it talks about the psychology, because you're sitting there going, okay, there is so much more to what's happening here than most people realize. And I had joked a long time ago when I got my bachelor's degree. I had said, I should have gotten two or three at the same time, and one would have been in conflict resolution, and another one should have been in HR, and another one should have been in organizational psychology, because that's a lot of it is, how do these people fit inside an organization that supports the people that are inside this organization? So I went back, like I said, 25 years in, and got my master's in organizational psychology. And I tell you, the light bulb went on in those courses, and it's like, that's what we call the behavior I'm seeing, right? this is this kind of leader, and this is the description for this kind of leader, and this is the description for this kind of leader, and these are some of the theories that work around that. But it's not like we had invented any of it. It's just finally the like we talked many times, the common language around the different types of leadership and things like that were coming together. And it's still amazing how many organizations just don't necessarily see that what they are doing, right? The development that they are working so feverishly toward is really all about the psychological development of the organization. And how do you get gets down to the right people in the right seats at the right time, and then the appropriate, training and development to get the best performance, in the position they're in. And every organization still has their tough times, right? And I mean, we're literally talking about role transitions, and that is hard inside this, this OD kind of structure, because as organizations grow, you add different job roles. And if we're not clear and we don't understand what that job role is and how somebody transitions from one role to the next, a lot of the pieces, the ops side can go upside down if we're not clear about that. So I don't know, David, I'm sure you see it all the time, right?
Yeah, and spending, this is what's so cool, spending the time with you, because you start to realize there's a lot more to it than the blocking and tackling of having this metric and having a flow chart that say those are the mechanical aspects of making
Right.
The thing happen, and then there's the people aspect of it, and that's not nearly as easy. That's where all the magic happens. Knowing what to do, knowing what the metric is and the business model and even the ideal workflow and procedure, that's the prerequisite. Knowing how to effectively go get people paired up with that as closely as possible is really the magic. That's why I love that you, in your career, because you see a lot of people that, like I'm probably in that category. I didn't go that route, but I'll see people that are more left-brained like I am, and very, I think before, and I want to clear this one up, I think last time or time before, I said something about, like psychology is not a hard science. That the opposite of in hard science, that's referring to fields of study like mathematics. That's not saying that psychology is not hard. It's in that case, it's just there's a lot of unknowns and it's messy. And so you'll see somebody that's very left brain like me that loves the mathematics and the operations. I've never seen a flow chart or an org structure or anything like that, a process diagram that I didn't like and couldn't find a way to make better. And so then later on in the career, it's like, you know what? I'm going back to school and I'm going to go get my MBA or something like that. Quite honestly, almost useless, depending on what level of leadership you happen to be at. If you are good enough at being able to parse out strategy and not choose horseshoes when you see a Henry Ford making a car manufacturing plant, if you are good enough at those things, I would definitely recommend going the route that you went. I just think there's so much wisdom in that. So, there's a lot.
Yeah, and it's funny because you start talking about the whole a checklist. I've never met a checklist I haven't liked either, right? I gravitate to those things. That's just what my experience has taught me. But it is interesting, right? We in the construction industry, we love the hard metrics. We love the lists. We love the things that we can tangibly put our hands on and check through. Which is why, back to the talent value stream, we hire people just like us. So in every construction company, we talk about the small world and how people move around inside, from one company to the other, because we tend to hire like ourselves. And I know we'll talk a little bit about some of this, but it's interesting when you start to look at the psychological biases that we have and why our organizations look this way. It's because we made them this way, right? So sometimes you just have to be able to step back and see that and intentionally make a different choice, or at least understand the choice that you're making. So we'll get to some of that.
Yeah.
I know here shortly, but it just always mystifies me that that everybody goes through it. Everybody sees it at one time or another.
Yeah, and this is truly where the magic is, for scaling and for even being joyful in what you're doing. Because
Right.
if you're, say, highly production oriented and highly driven, I mean, you definitely can scale and grow your business. It won't necessarily be as joyful as if you start to get all of the people really operating well together, and you're
Right.
doing a larger percentage of the things that you love doing. There are people that love filling out check boxes and filling out forms and doing very detailed data entry and getting it right every single time. And there are people that love being creative and coming up with this brilliant strategy. And there are people that love organizing and herding a whole bunch of people together and bringing them together and talking to 10 different personality types. And the beauty of organizational development is getting all of those people working well together, where they're
Mhm.
all working towards their strengths, their strength levels, their joy levels, and it's producing a great outcome. That's where you truly have sustainability. So, nothing that I love more than your approach to this. We'll dive a lot further into it. So this gets us to job roles, people, performance, and compensation. I mean, compensation factors in both from the business side of it. Like, I can't afford to pay more money than what the job is worth, but also from the if I'm looking for that job, I need to be paid to go do that job. We're going to dive a lot further into the details of job roles and kind of taking them apart into the basic components of what are the key results you're expecting, what are the lead measures, what are the really critical tasks, supporting tasks, what are the behavioral boundaries. We'll dive into that. But on compensation, just want to point this piece out, and is that there's a basic trade, and we're trading. If I'm a business, I'm trading a certain amount of compensation for consistent key results coming in from out of this job role for this group of related tasks. That's ultimately what the trade is. And so it's really important to look at four factors in that. One, the broader market ultimately sets compensation for a person
Right.
and their range of capabilities. It's not what any one contractor has. If there's 10 people that are qualified to go do a job and there's only one job available, the price goes down. If there's 10 jobs available and there's 8 people that are qualified to go do that job, the price goes way, way up. It's just that simple. It's supply and demand. Not all capabilities that are required for a job role are valued equally in the market. And compensation must be tied to the most valuable of those capabilities. Like, I came up through the field, so I am very capable of being an electrician. So I'm capable of running conduit. I'm capable of digging some ditches. But then there's other things that I do that are more valuable, and they're just more valuable in the market. My compensation can't. Let's say my job is half project manager and half electrician. I have to be paid as a project manager. I can't be paid as an electrician. That's how that comes together. So number three, nobody's really likely to work too long, more than 20% outside of their market value, either too high or too low. If I am paid too much, I'll stay working for you forever if I'm paid too much. However, it won't be viable for you. And sooner or later, you're going to have to come to me and have this little discussion. On the other hand, if I didn't know any better and I came up through the ranks and everything like that, and I didn't know where I ranked in the market, and you're paying me 20% below market, sooner or later I'm going to find out. So and that's the reality of it. So realistically, you got there's a range that's there, and it's probably maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 25%, but whatever, it's there. And then number four, and this is what's really important, this kind of ties back to that what we just talked about, is that some combinations of strategic choices and business models can pay dramatically more for the same exact capabilities, and still be very, very viable as a business model. So the contractors that have made those choices really well, they have an undeniable advantage in the talent market, because they can quite simply pay more. And so you've got to take all four of these into account. We're going to dive further into this, but this is just a foundation. Sue, anything to add to this or change? Or
No, I think number three, most people go, well, yeah, of course, if you're paid 20% under, you're going to leave. I did like the point that you made that if somebody's getting paid 20% more than what the value of that job is, yeah, there will be an uncomfortable conversation. So um, to me, it's always, if you're paying somebody far under market, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Paying them way
Right.
over, again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. It has to be something that continues to make your organization viable, because it does just blow up everything else inside. I think if you're really compensation, I am one of those true believers that if you are very, very proud of what you pay, then post it on the front door. And if somebody complains about this person making more than you, then it's called, go do that work and you'll get paid that as well. So, um,
Right.
viability is different for every company, but yeah, just be honest about what you're doing and lean into it and realize the market will adjust for you if you don't.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said is a great progression that a company needs to get into. I've never seen, I mean, I understand how you can get there. And I've been in that position where sometimes you won this project or whatever, you have this work and you absolutely need this person and you're being held hostage. So now you end up paying 20 or 30% more than say market value for a resource just because you need the resource, because that's cheaper than not having the resource. But now you have these things that are totally out of alignment inside your
Mhm.
organization, which is then you're like, okay, let's hide compensation from everybody. That it totally doesn't work. I mean,
Right.
everybody talks. Oh, and by the way, in the absence of information, I've never heard anybody guess somebody else's compensation and have it be anywhere close to right or better than right, if that makes sense for whatever decision they wanted to make. So if I don't like you, I'm going to assume that you're making more than me,
Yeah.
and that's it for the same amount of work. And so even if I don't know, even if you're getting paid less, so it yeah, this is tough. We'll cover compensation in much more detail in the future, but these are the basics of compensation and trading it for a role. So it's a really critical piece of your business model. Okay, so now let's talk through this really, really wide range of job role transitions. And there are dozens of different categories of job role transitions. Each of them have to be managed separately. So how do you start to attack this?
Well, you know me, right? I like the one that has the little white star and the little green box under the umbrella and the lounge chair, because I'm all about the start at the end, right? Every project that we build, all of that, we always look at what's the end project. We don't go and dig a hole if we don't know where that hole's supposed to go or what we're supposed to be aiming toward. So I look at the, kind of that retirement masterpiece side, where if this is where I want to go and I've given some thought to where I want to go, I'm going to start from there, kind of do the pull plan backwards and look at what are some of the roles that I want and how do I transition through those roles? What are the ones that are going to get me to where I want to go? I love the fact that we have, where we're changing companies and those companies can be different sizes. We might be changing industries. Um, all of that has to do with the role transitions, in your mind and where you want to be in that retirement masterpiece. If you're going to change industries, might be a similar role, but an entirely different industry, which is still a transition. It might be in a bigger company going from small to large or large to small, but it's still like we start this whole thing with the floors and ceilings, right? Your floors and ceilings are different when you go from small to big or big to small, but they're all transitions. You just need to look at them in your own career, right? In your own life, that whole career plus life is, for me, where is that going to take you into that perfect retirement, right? How do you get to sit under the umbrella or whatever, scuba dive and off of Cancun or whatever it is you want to do when you're going to that next stage, and how do you get there and how do you manage all of those? So, David, I know you see it all the time, big to small and changing industries, and I'll let you talk about that messiness of the pyramid on the left-hand side of the slide.
Well,
But there's a lot that goes on here, right?
right. Yeah, I know there's a lot. And I mean, even the company size, like you and I talked, before, I think, you started your career with one of the largest contractors
Mhm.
in the world. And I started my career with one of the, say, million single person contractors in the United States. And those are just dramatically different things. So all of, all of your skills would be totally not helpful for Wayne Shaughnessy, in running his little one man operation there. Oh, you're a
Right.
regional business director for Kiewit West. Great, great, good for you. So it doesn't mean you have no value add, but boy, there is a learning curve and a transition,
Mhm.
when it comes to doing that, and there has to be a lot that goes along with that. Same with moving up size, right? Same with going from a contractor that's maybe a stage 3 that's got 50 employees, and a person's a really good project manager there, and they move over to a very large company.
Right.
It feels very, very different for them. The accountabilities are much higher. The processes are much tighter. The scope is narrower. So it's a very interesting, role transition in either direction. So that's a challenge. Yeah, moving up through the organization and
Right.
moving around is very, very different. Moving from the field to the office is a transition. Moving from project management to estimating, even if it's the same level of role, that's a versatility move that is fantastic. It may be part of an overall career progression. It may be just part of getting somebody into the right role. There's similar skill sets between a project manager and an estimator. However, there's slightly different personality trait differences that can go lead a lot to enjoyment and everything. So it may be a move from that standpoint. So yeah, there's a lot of different moves, and it. I don't think we touch on all of them here, but I do think it's important to understand that each one of these types of moves has a very different dynamic to it, and then you have then the dynamics of the individual person, which we're all different there too, right? And I think the last one that we want to talk through is probably, I'm in the same role, but the conditions are different, right? So,
Right.
that might be that I founded the company and I moved through stage one, I moved through stage two, and now I'm at stage three. My leadership my everything about my leadership style, how I allocate my time, all of those things has to be dramatically different. Even though I'm still the same person, I'm the president of the organization. And if I'm still trying to run the business, today's stage of growth, like I successfully navigated through yesterday's stage
Right.
of growth, it just won't work. It'll create a lot of stress on me. It'll create underperformance in the organization, and it'll create stress on the team. The market conditions can be very, very different. A leading leading any company, a contractor, any type of company through massive growth, or a really rapidly growing industry, is very different than leading through, say, that bubble. Now that bubble burst,
Mhm.
either that bubble's leveled out and we've got to maintain steady state. That's a different type of leader. That bubble burst and you're trying to catch a falling chainsaw and look for something else to hang on to. That's a different type of leader. It just requires a different focus. Maybe the same person, but it requires a very different focus. And you've brought this up before, just because of your experience. But geography, apparently, you can't take a New Yorker and move them straight on out to
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
Hawaii.
yeah, well, and yeah, that's definitely a thing, right? It's the not just the same role that the person's in, but it's the geography that you're in. It's the culture that you're working in, inside that geography. And yeah, in my experience, I was tasked with going over to Hawaii and finding out, hey, what is going on here? We're having some complaints, really some people problems over here. What's happening? And what we were finding out is that we were going and grabbing people from certainly East Coast and West Coast and picking them up and dropping them off on a job, on the islands. Same kind of job, same, basic crew structure and crew size and building same type of work.
Right.
But the manager had such a different mode of work based on the geography and the culture of that piece of the organization they were working at on the East Coast or West Coast. It was really causing problems in Hawaii. And we did find out that you kind of have to migrate people to the center of the US, then you can take them out. But yeah, just dropping, one extreme social culture to another is it can really be it can feel disruptive, even though it's a job you know how to do, it's a job you've done, it's a job you're still doing, but it's still a transition of a role because you're working with different people in a literal different environment. Now, how do you manage that? So, things to note, it's not just all plug and play.
Yeah, wow. So there's a lot here, right? And then there's what leaving. Yeah, well, let's talk about joining a company. There's two different, probably levels you're joining a company at. There's joining a company in kind of the entry level couple role, layers of the organization. That's one transition, very different transition than to bring people in. And we see those transitions, especially coming on sometimes with succession or with growth, and you're bringing somebody in at these highest levels in the company. That's a whole different problem to go work through, because you really have to get the cultural integration right. You have to spend a lot of time with their teams and helping get them acclimated. Yeah, that one's difficult, especially if the culture was always no. Everybody that's a vice president in this company came up through the ranks of this
Right.
company, and now you're looking at bringing somebody in from the outside because you need a specialized level of expertise. Maybe it's in manufacturing and fabrication. Maybe it's in risk management, and yeah, that can be a challenge.
Yeah, you
And
can, and it's funny because you can bring high expertise people in. It's almost easier in construction to bring in the high expertise people that can come from maybe another industry. Again, through the finance or HR, those types of things, because they're bringing in a specialty that probably that contractor doesn't already have. But part of that role transition then is, hey, you can bring your expertise and you can get right to work, but you have none of the shared language with anybody because you may have come from that other industry, or come from another contractor, and they each call things different, right? And
right,
coming in as kind of that support role makes it a little difficult as well because you're trying to bring in expertise, you're trying to make an immediate impact, and yet there's this whole thing you have to transition through, which is gaining the hearts and minds and trust of everybody around you and having the common language to talk about that.
and that gets into, as you're looking at that gets into that onboarding piece of the talent
Right.
value stream, right? That's where you've got to look at it and say these systems have to look very differently. Bringing me in from the outside is very different than bringing me up or across from within the organization. So
Right. Well, and onboarding, somebody inside an organization for 30 years can still be onboarded into a new role through a transition a half a dozen times, a dozen times, right? Every time they move to a new role, that transition calls for the offboarding of the person, that the job they're taking, and an onboarding into the job that they're moving into. So it's that whole cycle starts over again.
constant feedback.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then we've got the people leave the organization.
Mhm.
Sometimes people leave and it's just they got a great opportunity somewhere else, and there's nothing to do besides say, wow, congratulations. Maybe it was a
Right.
relocation that they had to do just from their own personal family draw or something. And so categorizing those into regrettable or non-regrettable, meaning you're um, happy that they left or you're like, oh, I mean, and
Yeah.
I can be happy for somebody and not happy that they left. That
Right.
that's still a regrettable. and then and then a non-regrettable, that those are things to probably look at. If somebody comes in and turns in their resignation and you do a little mini like backflip inside and go, yeah, about time. Quite honestly, you probably should have handled that earlier in your
Right.
evaluation process, because it probably hasn't been good for anybody for the last year or more if that
Right.
happens. And then there's the voluntary or non-voluntary side. Did that person choose to terminate their employment, or did you choose? And I would separate these out from reduction in force type of things, right? There's, we
Right.
are in a labor intensive, most contractors are labor intensive. So there's a big difference between we wrapped up this large job in this city over here that's a couple states away or something, or just wrapped up a large job period and we had a reduction in force. That's very different than we let somebody go because they were underperforming.
Right.
So
Exactly. Exactly.
So any other leadership moves that we need to talk about here in any more detail? We're going to cover this in more detail in the future. Is there anything else for the rest of our discussion today that we need to touch on?
No, probably just the emphasis that all of this is a continuous cycle, right? No matter where you are in any of this, you're going back to the talent value stream and circling through one more time every time somebody moves to a different role. And again, we'll talk about that more as we move forward. And they'll certainly anybody going back to the first of these discussions will see that we've talked about it then too.
So you're saying there's not one checklist I can just run down, get this done, and all set? No.
Well, you could. I mean, we could probably, just print out this slide and put it up on the wall and say, "Hey, this is it. You're good to go." Um, but then, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
That's just that is not the human nature of things.
I know for me personally that right there is one of the biggest struggles coming from the up through the field. You make a list of things that have to be done, and this is all the way up into project management or whatever. You're building a project, so you make a list of the things that have to be done. You prioritize how you're going to do them all, and you just get them done. And we even track things like rework is a really bad thing in the field, and project management level. So you don't want to have any rework. And yet when it comes to running the business, it seems like you're constantly doing rework, but it's not the same. Every time the cycle is a little bit different. So
Right. Right.
you're
Well, and I guess, the difference between developing people and taking them through these role transitions is again, it's either depth in the role or the leadership trajectory that we're helping people to transition from one role to the next. Let's face it, reworks when you're ripping something out that didn't go very well and having to put it back in. Uh, you contractors pour concrete over and over and over and over and over again, and it's not always rework, right? So there's the new
right.
job with the new pouring of the concrete. It really gets to be, is this the regrettable or the non-regrettable when we're talking
Yeah.
about people, right?
That's a good analogy. You're right. It's like building different projects, or about going back in and remodeling a project that you have, you
Right,
built it now, and 5 to 10 years later, the space needs to be remodeled because it's no longer meeting the needs of the project owner that was
right.
using the space. So
Yeah.
no, okay, makes sense. So that brings us to, and let me just run this pat. This is how I kind of see and these are all interrelated. It's not meant to be the whole answer, but just 4 general career progression paths. And then from there, they're all kind of interrelated with each other. And this is how, like, if I'm managing my career, I've kind of got to look at this. And if you're managing my career, from the company's perspective, probably some broad categories. So one is just depth of specialty capabilities. Like, I am absolutely the best at designing this type of system, or I am that crazy amazing pre-construction manager who can take a napkin sketch from a customer of a project and turn it into an 800 line item, very detailed cost model that they can go through there and build off of and do what if scenarios with. The building those capabilities takes decades to go build and takes constant
Right.
practice, and so you're really staying in a very pretty narrow scope, and you're moving up. And then that's one. And then there's like a versatility of capabilities path. And I know some people that have done that, and they've gone through, like, almost every critical role in the company. Like, if the company got down to 3 people left, they would be the one person that could run around and go do everything. And usually they've been there. They're very long tenured type of people that have been there, and they enjoy that. They may be really good at some of them, and others they are just good enough at. But that's an incredibly valuable skill set to have. That's an incredibly valuable person to have, because you can they're a utility player. In sports they call it a utility player. You can move them in just about anywhere whenever you need to. There's people that get better and better at training and developing of others. I'm thinking about a friend of mine, Carl, and he's a good electrician. I learned a lot from him. He was an okay foreman, but he is a brilliant teacher. And he's been, finally he made, interestingly, this gets to the last track. Interestingly, he wanted to move up the supervisor managerial, track, and, manage projects and manage this and manage that. But it just wasn't satisfying for him. And then he, when he really backed up and looked at it, I'm so thrilled. And he decided to make the move and focused on teaching. And I don't, he's been teaching at the apprenticeship program, I want to say for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine how many, so what, that's 30 students a year graduating, so what he's responsible for, what's 30 times 20? So I'm not very, so, so he's probably had an impact on 500 people,
Yeah.
that's his impact. And he's gotten so much, brilliance and developed brilliance in that training and developing of others. And then there's the, kind of supervisor management leadership. And there's a technical thing that you're managing. There's a scope of work, but you may be growing, in that. So you might have started out as a, field engineer or something, moved into the office and moved into a project management path. And now you're head of project management. So that's kind of moving up in that. And you're learning to manage projects more, but there's a point in which you transition from managing projects to managing the people in the process. And that's really, moving along that track. So I don't know, how do you end up seeing this? This was a slide that I just dumped in here for our discussion, and it was just how it was working in my brain at the time.
Well, first off, I agree. That kind of gray circle that wraps all around them. Um, all of these have to be in some ratio inside an organization. Otherwise, if you just have these leaders running around, but there's no one to do the rest of the work, then they have no one to lead, right? You get the depth of specialty. People maybe head down and getting an awful lot done without a lot of direction as to where the organization's going, right? So when I look at this, I look at the first one, that depth of specialty capabilities is that professional, that deep professional development, right? When you look at the blue line, training and development of others, it is that deep understanding of what this person does, that high expertise person, right? We tell the story of the person who comes in with 30 years of experience. You hired them to fix this big machine that costs you, hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to have down. And they come out and they literally look at it for 5 minutes and fix it and hand you a bill for $50,000. And you're like, why am I paying this? Why am I paying $50,000 for 5 minutes of work? And it's like, no, you're paying $50,000 for the 30 years that it took to get to being able to diagnose this in 5 minutes, right? So it is that deep expertise that is just fabulous in many organizations, because you can move forward with that, right? The versatility of capabilities, I like to look at those people, at least the jobs I was on. Those were those punch list people. They were the super logistic, super organized, good communicators that could just kind of manage the puzzle pieces and inform the owner of how this was going to work, right? They were just influential enough, but they didn't feel like they were spinning a bunch of plates. They felt they were, strategically managing their way out of the project. Not the same as somebody with high expertise, head down and really getting that done. These are really very highly organized arrangers of other pieces of information, right? So, they were fabulous at closeout. Those are the people you wanted at the end of the job. The training and development of others, I look at, these are the people that are the ones that identify capabilities of others, right? They're seeing the ones who have the depth of specialty. They're seeing the ones who have that versatile thought. They're seeing the ones that have enough influence to lead others and can help drive those people, train those people, develop those people in the trajectory that those individual people show, right? They're good identifiers of the individual kind of condition, right? This is who this person is, and they help them identify it for themselves, become more self-aware. And then the green line, those are the people that are, in my mind, they're the connectors. They're the aligners. They're the ones that are saying, here's where we want to go. Let's gather up everybody in these other categories that really understand this. And I want to empower you to do the work to where we're going to go, right? So everybody has their path. And probably the biggest thing is everybody seems to think they have to be on the green path. Yet you can be a leader without a title. It's really understanding where you want to run to work every day. What is it that just makes you so excited to get there and get to work? That's the line you need to be in. There's going to be some green in all of those,
Yeah.
but don't shy away from the thing that you are really really good at, right? And a lot of it is helping people to identify that, right, and realize that the progression paths are not the same. They shouldn't be the same, and it takes the combination of all of these roles to be able to all of these paths to actually be able to have a functional, scalable, sustainable organization. So very interrelated.
It's interesting that you brought up the punch list. What I was thinking about that crew, and I was thinking about one of our yeah, I want to say they're one of our most profitable clients, and they are absolutely the best at their cash flow turns. So their capital utilization is number one out of our clients, and profitability wise, they're in the top five. So they've they've achieved success on those measures. And one of them is that, and I've been thinking he retired, so he's on his retirement masterpiece, but he still comes to the company parties. But it's this gentleman that's been in charge of their punch list crew for years. So they consolidated their punch list because it was down to people that were highly versatile. They weren't
Yep.
necessarily the highest production individuals, that were out there building the project day by day, but they were the ones that could come through there and they could fix a little bit of this scope and a little bit of this scope, and they had like just enough abilities to go talk to the customer and massage this over and go work with this person over here. And because they, I would say one of the keys to their success of getting off projects with customers being very very delighted and getting off of them at the right cost was consolidating that punch list function
Mhm.
within the
Yep.
company. And yeah, I was, as you were describing that, I was thinking of the guy because he's fantastic, and I see him at the Christmas party every year, and he's been working on he tried to retire, and then he got bored and he came back, and then his wife pulled him away more, so so
Uh,
anyhow, yeah, but you're right, and there's all of these have value. Unfortunately, I think a lot just in our culture, really. I mean, not just in the construction industry, but our culture as a whole says if I'm not like at this higher point on the pyramid, then what do I talk about at family dinners or something? And no, that's
right,
just not true. That
right,
is not
right,
true at all.
right. Yeah, you need to talk about what you're really good at, and
Yeah,
so be good. Be okay being good at that.
right. So the other side of this now, let's talk about wealth, and all the different dimensions of this. And Sue, this one, I've been waiting to have this conversation with you. I guess we have this conversation over wine all the time, but to me, you have this amazing life. You're always laughing and smiling. You haven't lost the little girl. So that's not a picture of Sue, by the way.
Yeah,
It's the little
no,
girl.
no.
But to me, you haven't lost that, and yet it's kind of interesting that like Jeff, so like your husband, he what in his retirement did the certified financial planner route or something like that. So you guys definitely pay attention to that side of it in a cool geeky level, which is awesome. But to me, you pay attention to all the other things that make life worth living. So how do you see this?
Well, we've tried to be fairly holistic about things, right? And a lot of it comes back to what we were talking earlier, right? Don't make a long term decision off of a short term problem. We understood that again for financial wealth, it was a matter of it was going to take a while to grow this, and so we just started putting money in 401ks. We started buying the company stock, those types of things. We looked ahead to what the nice thing about construction is if you like the people you're working with, you're going to work very, very closely with them. The other nice thing is if there's people you don't like working with, it's not going to last forever, right? You get to move to the next job. So you start to, or at least I would think, you want to start to look at those things that not so much what is it that you want, what is it that you don't want, right? What are the things that you don't want, and start from there. So we tended to look at a lot of those things. I laugh at the one that says inner peace and joy. Most people don't, sit around and talk about, oh, I have inner peace and these are the things that bring me joy. But if you can sit around with a lot of people and there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of that, you just feel better about it. I myself, actually, my husband and I both, we are huge whiteboard geeks, right? We've got 7 in our house. I got for Christmas a 4x6 double-sided magnetic rolly whiteboard that sits in the dining room, actually. But a glass of wine and trying to figure things out, we will literally roll it out into the family room and each grab a Sharpie and just start talking about things. We talk about our philosophy for, whether it's, philanthropy, what we want to leave to the kids, the things we want to teach the kids, all of that kind of stuff, because it just feels good to do. And frankly, most generations don't talk much about this stuff. So it made a lot of sense for us. And then in my super ultra geeky world, it was probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, took the Clifton Strengths Assessment and got my 34 report, brought it home, had my husband read it, and he laughed through the whole thing. And I said, what is so funny about this? And he goes, this has got you written all over it. And the nice thing about that for me, it has really helped me for self-awareness. It's helped me. David's laughing because I'm having to give some context here in this, and I am not great at context, not historical context anyway. But it's helped me to gather my own self-awareness and to understand, how my husband talks and how he hears me and how I hear him. And since we've gone down that silly geeky road, we rarely, it's not that we don't disagree on content, but we rarely have arguments because we understand how each other is talking. So
Right.
we've spent quite a bit of time on that, which, and to me, rolls up into the self-actualization, the impact on others, the close relationships that, we can call it inner peace and joy, but it is literally just nobody's getting the worst of me because I'm not living there, right? I'm trying to live in my best because I know how I can do that. So, yeah, to me, a lot of it is that, and yes, we've done it for the rest of my family, and yes, they laugh every time I bring it up, and all of those things. But it's been extremely helpful for us. And then when my husband retired, just like you said, he really wanted to get more into financial planning, so he got a master's in financial planning. He passed the CFP exam, so he's a certified financial planner, and we help our kids and we help our kids' friends. So that's just kind of how we look at it, as the kind of the full dimension of life is not just what we have, but what we can give back in kind of our time, our treasure, and our talent. So that's where
Right.
we go with it.
And so you took very much control, take control of that at your life. On the Let's go switch over to the company side now. Like how do you see this and manage this, and and to what degree do you manage this and guide along? Because like when I think about that one on longevity and health span, and the difference between those two is longevity is how long you live, health span is within that that 100 years that you cited earlier. How many of those years am I able to go do the things that I want to do? like like I would like to be able to pick my great grandkids up off the floor and under my own power. I don't want to be sitting in a corner. I might be, but I don't. But I'm trying to do things today to go make sure that I'm physically conditioned enough so that 20 years from now I can pick my great grandkids up off the floor and they can laugh at me. Um, and I was talking to somebody the other night, and it was super good person, but had is it companies at a transition point in their growth, and he's probably put into a role that is neither well defined nor, and quite frankly, he's probably not really, doesn't have the right aptitude, doesn't have the right makeup for the role. So it's both poorly defined from the company standpoint because they're going through growth, and yet he's really probably not cut out for that role even if it were perfectly well defined. and it's just created so much stress. And he's just like, look, you go,
Yeah.
and yeah, man, this has probably taken 10 years off my life. Now that's probably, yeah, that's how he's feeling. But we know that, stress and all of those things, they cause bad eating habits, they cause all kinds of things. And yes, it does legitimately take time off your life. And it definitely takes joy out. So, when I think about that, to me, that's part of the both privilege and burden of leadership, is to go do your best to help the people that are within your care to do have these things. I don't see people
Right.
leaving companies often that have a best friend at work, type of thing, where they love coming to work. When I see teams that are getting things done, and I actually love Underground because it's like some way you can be out in the mud and it's just, there's nothing going right. And the crew has a very kind of sick, twisted sense of humor, but they're definitely laughing out loud while they're mucking stuff out, breaking concrete, doing whatever hard work of the day has to be done. So I look at those things as both a human thing as the person, and I look at it as a leadership management thing as a company. How do you end up seeing this in organizational development?
Yeah, and really the pieces, to me, the basic premise behind this kind of dimension of, again, the holistic wealth of a person is also, what is the holistic approach to job roles. If you have got, as a leader, as in an organization that is well aligned, and as that's the leader's really their job to help continually align the inside of the organization with the mission and vision of that organization. In doing that, do we have a good, whatever that strategy might be, if that strategy has growth, what are the new positions you're going to need? And can you vet out what those positions are, what they look like, what are the quantifiable outcomes of those roles? And not just that, but who does that role report up to? Who does that role collaborate with? And who ultimately reports to that role? And we need to put a bit more in those job roles about the people side of that. Had a this was a number of years ago. It wasn't a job that I was that they were working on for me, but there was a job opening for an office manager, and a person came in and said, "Hey, I was thinking about that. What do you think? Do you have a minute to talk about it?" So we talked, and I said, "Well, why do you want to do this?" Well, of course, they went to it pays more money. I said, "Okay."
Right.
But I said, what do you think it is? And so the person described literally the best pieces of the job role. And I said, but do you also realize that when, the front office person calls in sick, you need to sit in that office and take those calls that day? You're the one that's going to have to deal with lunch and the specialty lunches from the vice president and all that. When the vice president, who sits in this one office, wants a picture hung, you're going to have to call maintenance and have it done in the 2-hour window that this person is going to be at lunch, because they don't want them in during the day, and all of these other things. They said, it's all of that. I said, I believe you can do it. I'm just not sure you want to do it. And so I think it's the organization's really responsibility to vet out the whole ultimate job role and what that role has to act like, and not just produce, right? It's got to have the behavioral piece in it as well as the production performance. So that I think is what the leaders and managers of an organization, that's their responsibility. And I think it's the person's responsibility to go, I need to know more about this role before I take it. These are the reservations that I have. If I'm going to have to do performance reviews, I just don't know that I want to do that. And then the organization, the leaders in the organization, have to be okay with the person loving the job they have and not necessarily wanting the job we would like them to take. So
Right.
there's a lot of understanding of those roles and the correct connection between the performance and the behavior of that role and the person that's going to be in it. Both of those have to fit for it to be something that someone can look at holistically and really thrive in, and find their inner peace and their joy and their self-actualization, and have a good impact on others and have those close relationships, because they've chosen the role as much as the role has been, described to them. It's a good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so they can do, want to do, needs to be done. Yeah, that's the hard triangle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is, because we want people, and society's told people forever, just like that last slide, right? You should be on that green line, and you should want to be the leader of over here. And it doesn't have to be about the money. Not a lot of money will pay for things that you just don't want to run to every day.
Right. No, really good points. So with that, I want to recap our, and we've talked about this in, previously, but you have the different stages of growth. You have, for the company itself. And then, but within each of those stages of growth, and we had an intro to that in part one, but within each of those stages of growth, then you have the management team and the management systems. Really, all of it's kind of going through this, all aspects of it: the strategy, the systems, and the people themselves. Kind of go through three major phases as we're looking at development phases. That, from emerging, we're kind of figuring this out. Probably bringing habits from before into the new role or into the new stage of the company's growth, not fully seeing everything. And then you want development to be perfectly equal on across the board, but it's not. That's just not how things go away. And people may join and bump you up quite a bit. People may join and pull you down a bit. Somebody may leave, which could again pull you up or pull you down depending on where you're at. But either way, you usually go through this period, and it's a pretty long period where it's pretty hollow, and there's a divide where there's one or two people or one or two systems that are working really, really good, but they're out of balance with the other people there. And that may be at a person level, and that may be at a systems level, or it may be both. Like for instance, if the get work side of the business is way out of alignment with the operational execution side of the business, that's a hollow type of situation, and that's going to create a whole lot of stress. So ideally, they want to both be working up together and close. Now, once everybody's together, and the strategy and the systems and everything's operating well at that current stage of growth, and they're spending some time looking ahead. That's a lot of what we do with teams is, especially when things are going really, really bad. I know this is always irritating. Things are, they're having the emergency of the day, whatever that may be. But we see that they are more than fully capable of handling it. Hey, that problem is going to be there tomorrow morning, no matter what. So they've got that emergency of the day, and then we're coming in and saying, okay, hey, let's talk about what doubling in size would look like. Let's talk about your org structure in the future. Let's talk about your strategy in the future. Let's talk about this. And you can just see the eyes rolling and the frustration. And there'll be like one person in the room that's excited about it, and everybody else will be frustrated, like, oh, I got to get back to my problems of the day. But it's the stretching of that not every day. If you stretch every day, then you're not really going to get any work done. But if you stretch on a systematic basis, you give the team time to recover and grow into it, then it makes them a little bit more ready as they hit that next stage of growth. However, when you hit that next stage of growth, no matter how prepared you are, you're pretty much right back to emerging. And so the cycle repeats over and over and over.
Right.
So that we've covered. But now, so what does that look like when we are at an individual person? Got a prior role that I'm in, the current role that you just moved me into, and then there's future potential roles. Because let's face it, if you're doing a good job with this, whole career development, talent value stream thing, when you move me into the current role, you should probably be thinking about 2 or 3 roles beyond that I might possibly, have a desire and aptitude for. But it's kind of the same development path, and it very much mirrors the development path of the team. So there's the emerging part where I'm in the role, but I'm not even really seeing the full complete scope. I know there's a job description. I know you described it all to me. I know, all of those things, but realistically, I'm not seeing all the nuances, because that's at best the kind of documented knowledge that's out there, and there's 90% of the role is kind of undocumented tacit knowledge that you need to have, and they call that experience. So and a lot of times I'm still trying to apply strategies, tools, and tactics from my prior role to the new role, just like a team as a whole is. Oh, and yeah, by the way, I might still be doing some of my prior role, because that's always a good one. I got promoted to head of project management, but they're not hiring any other project managers. Fantastic, fantastic move. Yes, my boss needs to go take on other responsibilities, so I get moved into the role, and that's fantastic. But it leaves a hole below. So it's kind of like, yeah, Dave, we know that you've never really managed other project managers before, but you're a pretty good project manager. So we'd like to promote you to, operations manager, or whatever the title happens to be. And but by the way, you still got to finish out these 3 or 4 projects that you're managing. And so then I think that's a short-term thing. But then we win a really big project that's along the lines of my specialty, and we know how this goes down. It usually comes back to me to do. So I'm emerging at that point. Hollow to me is like, now I'm in the role, and I see the full scope of the role, and I have the knowledge about it, but I'm really struggling to comfortably and consistently execute. And some of that is about me, and just learning, kind of what are the operating rhythms and the habits. It's kind of like, I know how to run, but I don't do it as consistently as I should. And the other part of it is like, it just takes a certain amount of time for a team to gel together and really start clicking together. And some of that's just time. So even if I know everything, if I came into the role and I knew everything to be done, I'm still going to go through a period of time of adjustment where the team's just kind of figuring out how to work together. And then, much like the team, I'm fully ready. I'm comfortably and consistently executing. I've developed some knowledge and capabilities about the future potential roles, and I've developed a few other, hopefully at least one other person, so that as I move to that future role, I can backfill behind. How do you see this? This is an electrician's version of organizational development.
Well, I see the A to B to C, exactly the same, right? It is all about kind of your comfort in that role. I look at it as you're going into it, as you're moving into that emerging, because everybody's going to start in emerging in every role that they start in. I think you move quicker through the ABC, depending on how you went into A. If you went into A being sold the role, right? It's like, hey, we would love you to do this because we need you to do this. And there's kind of that pressure to take the role that you refer to it all the time, like kind of that battlefield promotion, right? So you've been you feel good about it because you were chosen, but you were chosen to be in the role. If you chose to be in the role where it was more of a conversation, more of a, let's get this clear, that the manager and me have had some time to really look at what's expected, what I know, what it's going to look like to get through this. Most people from the outside are going to say, well, it's going to take the same amount of time. It's not, because the person who chose the role is just going to manage it differently. They're going to perform differently. They're going to have a different level of relationship with their manager. And chances are that emerging to hollow to ready, is there a scientific basis on this? Just my own my own history, right? But it tends to go faster when you've been very open, very honest, and very transparent about what that role looks like. So the tube that people go through seems to have a bit more velocity to it when it was something they chose and not something they were sold, right? So
Super funny that you bring that up. I was Ichak Adizes, the corporate life cycles guy, that's kind of spent his entire life defining how businesses start and where they die off and where they reach a peak and what all those things. I'm reading one of his books now, one of his latest ones, and he's in his 70s. I love the wisdom that somebody has when they've made it their life's work to study this particular thing all around the world, whether it's companies or governments or what have you. So, and he was talking about the Japanese. Their culture is they spend a lot of time up front making sure that everything's prepared. And so, but their execution's really quick. So they spend forever, it seems like, to pull the trigger. Like they don't have that nearly as fast as, say, US culture would. However, once they do pull the trigger on something, they move very, very quickly. So somebody had asked him, why are they able to move so fast on some of the changes in manufacturing and things like that? And he says, because they move so slow.
Right.
So,
Well, and what's the quote? I can't remember who it's by, but if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and how to solve it, and then 5 minutes solving it. Right. That whole
right.
preparation to execute and not just jumping
Yep.
in without at least having thought through as many things as you can to be prepared for what's coming up.
So agreed totally. That emerging gets mitigated substantially based on how prepared the person was as you're getting them even
Right.
ready to think about, like the conversation you have, and then the what the integration. So you gave a nice segue, I think unintentionally, into you've described this perfectly as kind of two general strategies for integrating somebody into a new role. Can you dive into this? Because it was brilliant when you described this to me the first time, just to the two paths.
Well, it's the interesting part that I had kind of found out basically through trial and error. Right, these are my own lessons learned. Is that when we were trying to bring somebody on, and there were systems and there were processes to follow or checklists to follow, with basically limited industry knowledge, even if they weren't coming from another company, they were or another contractor, they were coming either from another industry or coming right out of college or right out of somewhere that didn't have a lot of industry knowledge. Interestingly enough, we looked at it as, training a person and trying to get all of the things they need to know in a reasonable amount of time is really no more than, here on the right side of the screen, is that critical path or that phased training, right? Where we would just line out, here's 12 weeks, and here's what those 12 weeks are going to look like. In week one, depending on what week they started, if they started in the middle of the month, we might start with pay estimates. If they started at, the first of the month, we might start with, cost reports and projections because we were ending the prior month. But we would have a detailed 12-week schedule as to here's what this person's going to learn, who they're going to learn it from, what day they're going to work with them. And it would be, here's their learning phase. They would learn it for a day or two or three or a week. And then they would do the work the next week, and then they would become responsible for that work in, the third week or the third day or at the end of 3 months. So it was very measured. It was we need to make sure they understand the process. We need to make sure they understand the procedure. We need to make sure they get the lingo, that they understand who they're collaborating with and all those things. And it worked very well for that connection from kind of outside the industry into the industry. Or even into a role that they knew absolutely nothing about. The other side we found, I was actually trying to prepare a couple of people to take over my role so I could go do other things. And one of the guys that I was training we literally put him in the office right next to me. And I'll date myself here. This was the day of not as many emails, right? But there was still the physical, inbox where stuff still showed up in the mail. And this is a guy who I'd been working with for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So knew the company, knew the lingo, knew the people, knew the work right, that he was doing, didn't know my level of it, but had seen some of it coming through. So in this case, the fastest way to do it was going to be go basically full immersion on him. And what it was, again, he sat right next to me. Literally in my inbox, I put caution tape over the top and a note that said, everything goes next door. Nothing goes in this box. And then we had regular check-in meetings. So for a while, it was every day. He brought in the stack and we would just go through the stack. And some stuff, he would go, I have never, ever seen this before. Other things he goes, okay, I've seen this. I think I know what to do with it. By the time you get to week 2 or week 3, instead of the big stack coming in, that's everything because he'd never seen it before, the stack started to even out, where now it was never seen this before, because some of these things took a year because they only happened once a year. So some things, it's like, I still have not seen this. So that stack was getting a little smaller. There was the, I think I know what to do with this, but let's go through it again. And then there was the third stack of, I've handled this. Can you do some quality assurance on it and make sure that I didn't miss a beat, or that, that any risk is mitigated over here? And so over time, the big, I don't know what in the heck I'm doing with this pile, got down to just a few sheets of paper every few weeks. And the stack of the quality assurance pile was really very, very big, because that just the regular full immersion of doing this. But this was somebody who had quite a bit of knowledge, just didn't know where to take that knowledge to the next level, and who some of those connections were, and how to connect that to the next higher level of the process, or the next higher level of a person for approval. So we had two very different people and very different knowledge bases, and which one was going to work the best. But they were both very intentional. They were both very, monitored in a way. But the person had a safety net, and the person saw everything and heard the phone calls and saw the work and was responsible for the work. And it just made it that much better. So going through that whole emerging piece, they moved through it much quicker, because we had set up a system that said, either here's exactly what you do, or here's the pile you need to get through. And again, a little higher level, determine what you need help with and what you don't. So those were kind of the two phases that I had used that seemed to work out really well. It's just picking one and being responsible for it, monitoring it, and really making sure that we're watching the progress.
And I love, like, on the full immersion one, when you described your process, because I'm like, full immersion. Well, that seems like that's what every single company does. They take you out in a helicopter and they drop you in the ocean, and it looks like the picture with the sharks coming. So, and you're like, no, 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 no. There was structure to it. So having it just broken down into that, it makes so much sense. It's like the things that I handled that were just I'm 100% confident in, and maybe you run quality assurance on that, and then things that I handled, but I really want to talk through it with you. I'm 90% confident that it was not a one-way door type of decision. It's an easily reversible decision or task or something if I made the wrong decision. And then things I want to talk through, which to me is the category of I believe I know what I should do, but I'm uncertain enough that I don't want to do it before talking through it with you. But in that, I'm bringing it. And then there's the like, nope, I don't even know the questions to ask. I don't know. And so we've used this now with lots of different, roles and successfully in it. And it was brilliant that you had it full immersion so that I feel the full weight of the role immediately, yet with a really clear safety net. And that way you're accountable for me getting this thing done. And so you're definitely, I'm still getting it done, but I'm feeling the full weight of the responsibility from day one, versus the critical path where we're kind of phasing in me taking the responsibility. And I think you said something in there that I don't want to let go, like you, and I think I get this right. You divide it for a particular task where it's a responsibility, like, I don't know, doing the billings or whatever. There's a phase in there where you're training me. And then there's a phase where I'm doing the work and you're watching me do the work, essentially, maybe for a month or two. And then now you've kind of certified now that I've got it. So the training was to teach me what to do. You're observing me, which is kind of a coaching certification phase, to where you're giving me like, oh no, this might be a little bit faster. This might be a little bit, no, don't do this. And then there's here, you've got it. Now it's fully your responsibility, and you fall back to the normal manager. Did I get that about right?
Yes. Yeah, you did. And I guess one thing to note, and I tell people this all the time, because we've seen a lot of people that are, let me talk for a second about the people that are producing the critical path training, right? The one that is literally sitting with the newbie. That person, the reason they normally don't do the phased critical path training is because that newbie is literally glued to your hip, because they can't do anything. They don't know anything. They have to learn this line by line by line. I tell people all the time, it's okay for the first couple of weeks to have that newbie come in at 9 o'clock and go home at 3 o'clock, because you can't get your work done if they are glued to you from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Make sure they know that's not their regular their regular schedule, right? They're going to get back to 10 or 12-hour days, but making sure that the person doing the training has this thing set up enough that they can continue to be working responsibly and not just causing other issues by trying to push this critical path too fast, too early, right? Make sure you're flexible enough to get the training done, still get your work done. And the new person can take on a lot more responsibility a lot faster if you can give them that focused training for a smaller number of hours a day in those first few weeks. Suddenly they are pretty proficient in something fairly quickly.
Right.
And now they're taking all of that off your plate. And now you can go back to figuring out what that next step is.
So that's so to get past the emerging phase as quick as possible. This is part one of that. And part two of it is making sure that we've got the right person going into the role. And this is that intentional or biased. And knowing that we're all biased, the only way to get to an intentional selection process is to have a system and multiple parties involved. Is that a reasonably fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Going back to the Clifton Strengths Assessment, we do those with organizations all the time, and we'll put everybody's strengths together. They're 34, where they're high, which ones are just not their strengths. Put them all together, and it's very interesting when you look at construction companies. Imagine where they land. Most people that work inside construction companies tend to lead with either execution or strategic thinking. You get
Yeah,
you
because that's the
imagine,
right way.
I guess it's the right way. Yeah. And yet it's probably not the right way when you're in a community meeting and you're trying to come in because you're going to have to do some pile driving next to their home for 6 months, right? Having a high execution guy or the high strategic thinking person in there is not going to win the hearts and minds of the community. So if you don't have those relationship building people and those influential people, you're just going to end up gathering up a whole bunch of property damage claims and,
Right.
and working your way through those, right? So it is really understanding how the people on the team come to the table. I look at it as, if you're going to go into an estimate and you're going to get all like thinking people in an estimate review, why are you bothering to do the review? Because everybody's thinking about it the same way. You want as many diversified ways of thinking about it when you're in a bid review as you can possibly come up with, right? You want to look at new ways, updated ways, or find holes in what's in that estimate. You can't do that with the same people over and over and over again, because you get the like think. It's the same thing when we're looking at putting people in roles. We're going to naturally want to go to people that are just like us, because it's so much easier to manage them, because if somebody tells you to do it, you do it. So you tell them to do it, they're going to do it. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person for that role, because we've just picked somebody who's just like us. So it is getting down into the role, really looking at what that role really needs to do and what those outcomes really need to be. And then, who is that person? Who is that? Who does the pool even involve to get there?
Right.
But just knowing that and having that intentionality of, we should probably look a little bigger. We may still come up with the same pool, but let's not cut people out because they're not, cut from our same cloth.
Yeah, no, that's and that's hard to do as a person, because we really don't know about our bias. I mean, some of our biases we may know about, but in your education, this is funny. I didn't know there were so many biases. There's like 160 documented cognitive biases that are out there. I mean, and these are just things that, like, our brain is kind of malfunctioning. I mean, in a way, it's
Yeah.
and some of them are more harmful than others. Some of them are more prevalent, but either way, we all have our biases. And So systematically, how do that's kind of the magic of scaling, is putting together a system to ensure that all of the different parties are brought relevant parties are brought to the table for making the decision, and then there's a system for helping them communicate. Because if you get an
Mhm.
extrovert and an introvert together, the extrovert will communicate the heck out of all of their ideas. The introvert, will not.
Right.
The extrovert will take the passiveness as, oh well, I guess they're good with it. The introverts,
Exactly. Exactly.
so it's important to have a system, and we're not going to dive further into it here, but important to understand that this is not just about getting 3 or 4 people together in a room. That's the starting point of it. That's kind of level one of the system. But you've got to get to the point of where it's like, okay, how do you get these people to all contribute equally to the process, and how do you weigh out the contributions and everything, and then select the right candidate for the role out of your available selection.
Right. Right. And you're right. We'll definitely be talking about this more. This is where I would just throw in, always have a bunch of different colored 3 by 3 post-it notes on hand, and you can get a lot of people to give you a lot of ideas just with that old school way of collecting ideas. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, one idea per post-it goes a long way in trying to help find some alignment in whatever you're trying to do, whether it's figuring out a selection for a role or just trying to figure out the competencies or capabilities that need to be in that role. So it helps to kind of even the playing field a bit.
It's interesting. You're right. It does that because it's so small that
Mhm.
even an intro, I could just put one word on there, and
Yep.
that allows the a facilitator to be able to draw things out of me,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. And then
Yes.
there's the person that turns in their Sharpie and gets the fine little mechanical pencil and writes out all the details.
That's why you time bound it, right? So they only get 3 minutes. That way, if they're going to write one post it for 3 minutes, that's fine. If they want to write six, they're going to have to be a little more brevity to those.
Right. No. So there are lots of that's a perfect one. That's one of many systematic
Right.
processes to get there. I was reading minor segue on that. The Supreme Court, they have some very structured processes because they have people of all different backgrounds, all different
Right.
speeds of thinking. It's like one person might be thinking really quick. I mean, so like you measure, just so everybody knows, Sue measures that she thinks faster than I do. So if anybody wants to wonder, she actually legitimately measures, like on a validated test, she thinks 30% faster than I do or so. I want to retake, but whatever. So, but some people truly think faster. Some people may have a lot of experience in an area, like that person that you mentioned that's the high specialist on that really expensive piece of
Right.
machinery. So, what they can think about in 30 seconds, even if I had the aptitude to troubleshoot that and some of the experience, but I only had 10 years of experience doing it, not 40, it might take me 4 hours to think through that same
Right.
thing. So, you've got to level all these things out. And so, at the Supreme Court, they're making the biggest decisions in the land. You can agree or disagree with some of their decisions, but their process is that's why they put everything in writing, because it allows that person that wants to write 120
That's
pages
right.
on it, the person that wants to do 7, the person that can do it in 4 hours, or the person that takes them 4 weeks. It allows them kind of all equal time and say, and then they go through, then they have a process to review and comment and everything like that, and then go to voting, so that it's not just a popularity contest. They're going through a proper discourse and everything on it. So anyways, yeah, and yeah, they're using more than post-it notes, but it's the same exact process.
That's right. That's right.
They may still use post-it notes, but
They might.
I
Yeah, they
don't
might.
know that part.
Yeah, that's right. They might. And then, but yeah, they still time bound it, right? Because they can't just let it sit
Yeah.
forever. So,
Yeah, but no, like in terms of the role, like if you take that same thing, several of our clients are pretty systematic about the processes. So when they're defining the role, first of all, like if they haven't hired that role recently, if it's one of those low frequency roles, the CFO that they need today is very different than the CFO they needed 15
right.
years ago. So they don't dust off the old role description and update the fonts and put the new logo on it. They go through there and pretty much start from scratch, like what are the real role requirements and all that. Then once they're through there, then they develop an interview guide, and multiple people are trained to use the same type of interview guide, because each one of them will interpret the answers to the questions differently and things like that. And so they have a pretty structured process for how they go through the interview process, how they take the notes on it and everything, and how they communicate and really compare. So it's a very, very much a similar process. But that's how you go from, like, I really like Sally. She seems great.
That's right.
Oh, and she's the only candidate that we have. Let's get her on in there. versus going slow and going smooth on it. All right, so let's talk now about the challenges of moving through into a different role. And we broke it down into the top 11, and we had a 2x2 grid of kind of how to rank the problem, because everybody's going to perceive it differently. And so it was essentially ranking it on, how severe is the challenge. It's almost like the pain scale. It's somewhere between 0 and it's the worst I've ever experienced in my career. And then there's an urgency to solve, because that is also quite a bit different axis. And what we meant by that was like for instance, like, let's say, I went through a really bad project, early in my career. It was just a tough project, required a lot of weekend work, a lot of night work and things like that. But I was single. I had no other responsibilities. Everybody in the family is in good health. So was it a 10, like as in worst experience of my career? I mean, it was a good experience, but it was painful. It was really, really difficult. Yeah, it was really bad. But my urgency to solve, it wasn't. It just wasn't high for me to solve. Now, on the other hand, if I was a single parent, which I've unfortunately gone through that stage of my life, if I was a single parent, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So my urgency to solve would have been dramatically different.
Right. Yeah.
So,
there was a situation that someone who was working for me on the I-405 job, the next position for this person, because they were the community PR project person, and really they wanted to go to the next job. And they said, "Oh, I can't wait to this can be great, moving up in my career." I said, "Okay, well, first off, the next two big jobs, one is in Hawaii and one is in Vegas. You are now living in LA." I said, "So really the severity in the challenge for them is probably a 2 or 3, right? Not a big deal. But the urgency to solve was, you'd better go and talk to your spouse, because your time here is coming to an end in the next probably month or 2 or 3. You're going to get the call. Is your spouse ready to move to Hawaii or Vegas? And, how do you get everybody on the same page?" So when you're looking at that kind of challenge, again, not a role transition in geography, right? But not a role transition in anything else. But this was going to affect their family. And so their urgency to solve was in the top quadrant, even though it wasn't yet a severity of a challenge yet. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at this, and the issues that you're looking at personally.
So you kind of, this is how we would start with evaluating them and at least put them on this grid. Now the 11 challenges, I don't know. Well, let's talk through at least the first few in detail and catch some of the others. And we've got some worksheets that can help you work through these, but take it away. Talk through some of these.
Well, so let's just start with the first one, right? Easy enough, right? So one of the big challenges, and the biggest challenge I think most people feel when you're trying to transition to a new role, is that you are regularly doing work that others should be doing. So that can mean a couple of things. One is you have now moved up into a role, and the person above you is either doing the work you should be doing because they haven't gotten out of your way, or you're doing the work that you literally just walked away from, right? It could be you're in this role and you're doing work of other people next to you. You're doing work in, kind of cross-function type work, that it is a challenge because you're probably not performing the work that you need to do inside that particular role. So none of it is getting done very well, especially if you're moving up into a, managing managers and now you're trying to do their role. It just makes it very, very difficult because the lines get very blurry. The lines get blurry for you, the lines get blurry for the person above you, they can be blurry for the person below you. And it is extremely exhausting to do that. I know I've been in that position, David. I'm sure you've been in that position as well, where just doing things that others should literally be doing. So
Right. And
uh
that can
yeah.
come from sometimes just circumstance, and it's something you've got to work through. Gets to, how urgent is it to solve, and are we making progress on hiring the people to backfill?
Right. And that really bleeds into number 2, right? There's too many direct reports.
Right.
How many people can you really effectively manage? How can you train them? How can you develop them? How can you manage not their work, but manage them to manage their work? If there's too many direct reports, you're really not helping anyone. You're not helping keep the organization aligned, not helping align to the next level up. There's just too many people reporting to you. The top 2 bleed literally into the third one, where you're going home emotionally exhausted. I don't know about you, but there was a great MASH episode, again dating myself, where at one time they called somebody morally bankrupt and emotionally exhausted, and I laugh about that because you go home and it's not a tired, right? It's not, whew, that was a day, right? That you just
Right.
need to get some rest. This is, you are fretting, you are emotionally exhausted to the point that it's just not great fun anymore, right? So there's a lot of that happens. That certainly leads to, or is complicated by, there's so many things in the air. There are so many tasks that need to be done. You may be running around with 3 or 4, whether they're apps on your phone, whether they're sheets of paper, but you've got all of these to-do lists and nothing's together. Balls are being dropped. Items are not being, routinely completed. They're completed late, not completed at all. You thought someone else was doing them because, back to number 1, you're not really quite sure who's doing what because you're doing other things. And that leads into number 5, where now you look at the expected outcomes of the role that you're in, the role you just moved in, the role that somebody's just moved into, and there's just not consistent delivery of the outcomes that are actually expected. Those are things when you know that you are in you are in a challenging situation with a role transition. Either the person above you hasn't gotten out of your way, hasn't helped you move into your role. There's lack of expectation of what those roles are, lack of clarity on those expectations. But that whole, just those top 5, you feel it, you know it, you can tell when there's something going on. It's a matter of identifying that, defining it, putting the language around it, and going, probably a lot of people going, oh, yeah, man, number 3, 4, and 5, I'm feeling a lot. I'm feeling it most days. I'm feeling it most weeks, or have been feeling it for a while. It means somewhere that role transition has really either never taken place, or needs to have something done with it to be able to make people function better and get those desired outcomes. So, David, I don't know if you want to talk about more of those, but those really where, most people can feel it immediately is in those top 5.
Yeah, and I think when we put these together, I mean, this is all from coaching. Couldn't even count how many individuals get coached as you're helping navigate a client through
Mhm.
different stages of growth. But yeah, these were the ones that came up, and you're right, they all lead into each other. And so yeah, we could go through 6 through 11. I mean, just really quick of you've got concerns about the person who's now in your prior role, because they may not be doing exactly like you did it. They may be what I would call real concerns or fake concerns. A fake concern is they're doing the role just fine. Matter of fact, the team might even like them more, but they're not doing it the way I used to do it.
Yeah.
And a real concern is they legit may be struggling. They may be having trouble with 1 through 5. And either way, they're still 2 different levels of concern. But one is a me problem, and the other one I gotta it's a me problem too, but I gotta approach it differently. Feeling out of alignment, I can get moved into, especially if I'm changing roles. We've had a few high level, very high level executive moves over the last 6 months, and they've all been fantastic moves, good people. And no matter how much you want to talk about cultures being aligned, but really good people usually at that highest level don't change jobs very often. And so those people are going from a shock of having, here's my total group of peers and support systems, and now they're over here with this new team. And it just takes some time. You feel kind of out of alignment. It takes that first year or two to really start to get in and into your groove in that high level role. If you're moving up from a management track, you feel a loss of control sometimes from just being further away from the work. And it's a struggle to go from was directly responsible for doing this task, like turning the wrench literally and putting this bolt in, to now I'm removed from it. And at least as a foreman, I'm out there and I'm circulating and I can see that bolt going in. So okay, that still feels a little bit weird, but now what happens if I get promoted into a general foreman or a superintendent role? And I probably have never seen that craft person put it in, but it darn sure shows up on the punch list I'm responsible for. Right. So then,
Exactly.
oh, how's that supposed to happen? Which all leads into 10. Yeah, out of looking at 1 through 9, I'm just really not enjoying myself anymore. And or 11, I'm working too many hours, just to keep up. It's one thing. I look at surge, time. Like if you're going, there's peak times on a project. There's transitions that a company or project goes through. There's me learning a new role. But if I've been in that role for 6 months and I'm still, having to work 60, 70 hours a week just to go keep up, there's a problem with it. It probably won't be sustainable. Something will likely have to change in, my life or the company or the role or something like that. So this kind of leads us into the next piece. With these are the 11 challenges or 11 primary challenges. There's probably 30, but this pretty much covers it. And top 5 probably cover the first 90%, and 6 through 11. If you solve 1 through 5, you're probably good on 6 through 11. So with first thing to do when you're running a new challenge, or somebody else that's working for you, you feel like they're in a challenge, is sit down and really take inventory. It's what you do on a project. If you're getting in and you're trying to turn around a project, let's take inventory. Let's take inventory of what's done on the project. Let's take inventory of what materials and equipment we have on the project. Take inventory of what we have to get done, and let's start to create a plan. So we put together a quick worksheet. It's not quick to go through, but it's a couple pages, but it'll ask you a series of questions as you're walking through each of these challenges, and get you to really think about, what am I experiencing? How urgent is it? How severe is it? And getting into some specifics. And when you get to the end of that, a lot of times, just what was that quote that you mentioned? Was, I think that was from Einstein, of if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem. This will help you think about the problem and define it more clearly. And oftentimes, just in doing that, the solution or solutions will become more obvious. And contact us for a copy of it. If you're done and you want to talk about it or anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out. We will make time and find time to talk through it. This is not for clients, for anybody in the industry. It's going through a career challenge. So definitely reach out. We'll do anything we can to help. Okay. One final note. And so this is your floors, ceilings, and scaling. And I want to talk through kind of, almost the way that somebody might see it as this perfect leadership career path. Let's assume that I want to take that track. And, that looks like, kind of going through there, and I'm just making these little transitions one at a time, just climbing the stairs all the way up. And it seems totally perfect. I've got the aptitude for the growth. I've got the desire. Life circumstances permit, and I'm just navigating through. And that's great. But the reality is that, one, the path is rarely a straight trajectory. So first and foremost. Most of the time, there's a whole lot of lateral moves. There's economic downturns while you go through that. Each one of these stages of growth for a company takes 7 to 10 years to really go through a stage of growth and to navigate through it. The first couple stages go typically a lot quicker, but once you're in stage 3 and above, it typically takes almost a decade or so, 7 to 10 years, to move through a stage of growth decently. So the company's only going to grow so fast, and you're like, I could change companies. That comes with its own challenges. Luck and politics are a bigger factor than you might think. When you get into it, and there's politics and biases everywhere, and sometimes, like, if you have a choice between promoting two different candidates, but one of them you really really know and they've been with you a really long time, and the other candidate you don't know them quite as well, but you're not really sure and they seem about equal, probably, even if they're unequal by 20 or 30% or more, it's probably going to happen that it's going to go a certain way. Sometimes it's just a luck. There's for instance, there's a lot more 3-star generals that are capable of 4-star that are ready for promotion. I think they run at like a 3-to-1 ratio, which ensures definitely succession. But there's a lot of people that retire as 3-star generals, and there's just not that many posts available for 4-star generals. I think there's only 13 or something in the country or in the world, because they are in charge of areas of the world. So luck plays a pretty big factor in it, and it's not always perfect. Sometimes you're just, two people are fully qualified and you just pick one, and you weren't the one that was picked, or you were the one that was picked. So luck sometimes plays a bigger factor than you think. The idea of higher levels of leadership is often far, far better than the reality of the role day by day. You're like, well, the office is bigger. It's good spending a lot of time in it. You're only as strong as the leadership level supporting each stage of growth. So getting to the top of a hollow machine, and we talked about the development phases, but if you're at the top of that leadership team and it's hollow, it's a daunting task, and that definitely takes its toll and everything like that. So you want to get out of being hollow as quick as you can. So that's more challenging than it seems. And then if you skip stages, which they talk about this a lot in the leadership pipeline and that body of knowledge, that if you skip steps in your development, it may not show up in the first promotion you go through, but it will show up usually by the second or third promotion, and you're kind of building a bad foundation. So skipping steps is not always all it's cracked up to be. So anyways, but besides all those things, there's 6 things that are ideal, that are prerequisites, and there's 6 things that are kind of the reality of it. Sue, obviously you've seen lots and lots of career transitions here, navigating this. How do you see this?
Well, it really is the alignment of the top 6 with the bottom 6, right? It is the organization realizing that, again, that perfect leadership path is not perfect for everyone, because you can line it out that way. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way. On an organizational side, really there has to be that number 2, where the leaders in the organization really have to go, what is the desire for the leadership growth for each individual person? Then that person can have their reality, right? If you can find the people to find their best spot. I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he goes, man, I want to hire all of these guys that are just these, basically these A players, all climbers. And I said, where are they going to climb to? They're going to climb a ways, and then they're going to go to a different company because you think you want that. I said, you need about 80% or 90% of the people to be absolutely fabulous at what they're already doing and wanting to stay there, right? Wanting more of the depth in the role. So a lot of this is the organizational understanding and the leadership communication, the leader communication, that we do want, the right person in the right seat at the right time, and making that reality, rolling that more into that perfect leadership career path. But for the individual, it's again, what is your desire for leadership growth? Where do you want to be? And can you reasonably articulate that to your manager, what you want to do and why you want to do it and why you're going to be good at it. And having that open and transparent communication so that people get to produce the outcomes that they've signed up for and they're thrilled about doing it. So there's a lot on the personal side to really understanding what it is you want. And it's on the organizational side to understand that it's okay for people to be good at what they're already doing, right? And that will, you go back to those 11 challenges, that will eliminate more than half of those if the organization and the individual person just had a bit more of that um, open and transparent communication about the role that they're either in or the one they're about to move into.
Yeah, no, well said. I wish, I mean, even just personally, I mean, like I think about going and planning a project, even a simple project. I mean, I'm going to spend hours and hours
Mm-hmm.
studying the plan, studying the specifications, studying the work to be done, the scope and the contract, and creating a plan and things like that. So even on a small project, I'm going to spend hours and hours on it and get pretty detailed about making the list. And yet most people are nowhere near that intentional about how they
Right.
would go approach even a single role transition, much less what they want in their lives or something.
Yeah,
And that's
I think one of the best exercises that really isn't in this forte, but it can help people to see this, is when we talk with clients about, let's see your current org structure. Now, let's see what your org structure would have to look like with no names, what it would have to look like if you were twice the size. And they start to
right.
look and they start to see those named boxes, those titles with no one in them. And they're much better about going, who would be the right person? What's the right role here? How do we marry those
Right.
together? Because they're not tied to the work they're doing today. It seems to be much more of a challenge when you're in the middle of it and moving people around than when you get kind of your head up off the desk and look forward. People tend to be more thoughtful about connecting the two, again, without that immediate bias of, here's just what I need to do for right now, and not realizing the long term, making a long term decision off of maybe
Yep.
what could be a short term problem.
Exactly. Yeah, because you're right. You move people very differently. If you look at the organization 5
Mhm.
years down the road, you will make different personnel moves today
Yes.
than you would if you're just trying to solve today's problem.
Right.
Today's problem might be staffing a project, but if I'm planning on a lot of growth, I might want to actually overstaff the project with some people that where I'm planting the seeds and developing them for 5 years from now.
Right.
If I just want to get the project done, run as lean as I possibly can.
Yep.
But then 5 years from now, we'll be having the same exact conversation of like, there's
That's
no
right.
people available in the market. There's no this, there's no that. Oh gosh, I'm on fire, hair's on fire. So,
Yeah.
well, cool. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of, I think, everything we wanted to cover today. Coming up next is identifying and prioritizing improvements, right? So we've covered a lot. I think at this point, we've covered just about everything at an introductory level of looking down inside the organization, looking at how do we operate the business and what's the talent required to operate the business. And it's really important to now start to look at that and say, okay, great. We probably identified 100 things that could be done that need to do, but let's go prioritize those. Which ones are really the constraints and the key bottlenecks? Let's look at the organization and the people and say what can they do? What are their capabilities and capacity? And the will do is important. And you'd love to think that everybody would do everything they're capable of doing. Nah, not fully true. So they might for a short period of time, but not in the long term. They won't.
Right.
So that's what we're going to approach next is some of the tools and techniques of how to prioritize. And then after that, dive a lot deeper into job role clarity, because that's an ongoing thing. And then I think following, the third one after this is let's talk about the levels of strategy from the company and the overall enterprise. Where are we heading? To the individual market and industry sectors, what are the strategies there, all the way down to customer level strategies. So anyhow, that's what's coming up next, and that brings us to the end of another good conversation. So next one with wine.
Might have to be. I think we're moving to happy hour.
Okay. Yes, we're moving towards happy hour, so we'll do the next one with wine in hand or something. So see how that one works.
That's right.
All right, and again, contact us for copy of the slides, tools, questions, anything. So thank you.
All
And
right.
that's
Always
it.
great talking with you, David.
Building projects requires technical expertise and resources. Building a construction business is about developing and aligning those capabilities with customers. We exist to help contractors build stronger businesses for the next generation. From startup to sustainability, contractors grow through 6 distinct stages. Each stage of growth requires a different leadership focus, strategies, systems, and structure. Our goal is to broadly share information that helps contractors navigate each stage. Any resources discussed are available on our website at dbmteam.com.